Have you ever wondered what separates a billion-dollar success from, well, a total flop? A lot of the time, it really just comes down to one thing: the business model. And I know that sounds like a bit of a buzzword, but trust me, it's not. It's literally the blueprint for how a company plans to make money, how it creates something of value, gets it to customers, and, captures that value.
And to really get why this is so critical, we actually have to go back in time a bit. This quote here from Joan McGreta absolutely nails it. See, back in the late 90s, during the whole dot-com boom, business model was the buzzword. It was thrown around everywhere to justify these insane valuations for companies that, honestly, didn't have much more than a cool idea and a website.
And, well, we all know how that story ended, right? The bubble burst. Spectacularly. All these companies that raised millions, maybe even billions, all chanting that mantra to get big fast. They just vanished. Poof! Gone! And what was left was this giant pile of evidence pointing to some really, really big problems in those so-called business models.
I mean, it was just a massive collapse. And the weird thing is, the ideas were pretty exciting. The tech was brand new, the money was pouring in. So what went wrong? What was the piece of the puzzle that was just missing?
And the culprit, it turns out, was something surprisingly fundamental. It wasn't that the ideas were bad or the tech didn't work. Nope. The fatal flaw was a flawed or sometimes a completely non-existent business model. They just didn't have a coherent story. They couldn't actually explain how all the pieces were supposed to fit together to make a real, business.
All right, so to make sure we don't end up making those same mistakes, we're going to lay out a clear plan. First, we'll dig into that dot-com bust mystery. Then, we'll get a solid definition of what a business model actually is. From there, we'll get practical and walk through how to audit your own strategy and your capabilities. And finally, we'll talk about how you can keep evolving to stay ahead of the game.
Okay, so first things first. Let's decode this thing. Let's cut through all the jargon and figure out what exactly is a business model.
I absolutely love this definition. Think of a business model as a story. That's it. It's not some complex spreadsheet or a 100-page financial projection. It's the story you tell that explains how your business works, how all the different pieces, from your customers and your products to your operations and how you make money, all click together to create something that actually works.
And here's the thing. Every good story has a hero, a main character, right? In your business model, that hero is your customer. It all starts with them. And if your story can't answer two simple questions, who is the customer and what do they actually value, then honestly, the rest of the plot just completely falls apart.
Okay, so how do you make sure your story is a blockbuster instead of a total flop? Well, you have to test it. You have to kick the tires. And that's where this idea of an audit comes in. So let's start with the first step in this investigation: auditing your strategy.
Think of this framework as our playbook, our map for the investigation. What's cool about it is that it forces you to look outside your own company. You've got to look at the whole business context you're in, really dig deep into who your customers are, figure out what your competitors are up to, and map out your entire network of partners and suppliers.
And this is really where the rubber meets the road, because it forces you to ask some pretty tough questions. You're not just asking, what business are we in today? You're asking, what business should we be in? When you look at customers, it's not just about who they are, it's about what their biggest pains are. It's all about digging way deeper than the surface level stuff.
But look, a brilliant strategy is one thing. It's just a plan on paper, right? It's pretty much useless if you can't actually pull it off. And that brings us to the second, equally important part of the audit: turning the microscope inward to look at your capabilities and how you create value.
So this next part of the audit is all about looking under the hood at the engine of your business. It asks, do you have the right processes and infrastructure in place? Do you have the right people, the right talent, the right partners? And is your whole organization, your culture, your structure actually set up to make it all happen smoothly?
Okay, so you've looked outside of your strategy, you've looked inside at your capabilities, the plan seems solid, the engine is humming, but how do you know if you're actually winning? How can you measure in a really clear and objective way if the whole system is working?
Well, the answer is actually in a really powerful financial tool called the DuPont formula. And don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It just breaks down your company's performance into three key things. First, how profitable are you? That's your profit margin. Second, how efficiently are you using your stuff, your assets, to make sales? And third, how much debt are you using to grow? It gives you this incredibly clear picture of your financial health.
And here's the cool part. When you put those three things together, it all comes down to one single number: ROE,
or return on equity. This is the big one. It's the ultimate report card. It tells you exactly how good your business model is at turning the money invested in it into actual profit for your shareholders. It tells the whole story.
But here's a really important point. This whole audit thing, it's not a one-and-done deal. A business model isn't some static document you create, frame, and hang on the wall. It has to be a living, breathing thing. It's a blueprint that's got to adapt and evolve as the world changes around it. So after your audit, you basically have 4 big strategic moves you can make. First, you can enhance. That's just making your current model better, tweaking it for more efficiency. Second, you can expand by taking that model into new markets. Third, you can explore completely new business models. And fourth, and this one is super important but often overlooked, you can decide to exit a business that just isn't working anymore.
So there you have it. We've gone all the way from the wreckage of the dot-com bust to a solid blueprint for thinking about your own business. Now, it's your turn. It's time to take these ideas and apply them.
So let's just wrap this all up. If there's one big lesson to take away from that whole dot-com era, it's this. A cool idea isn't enough, not even close. A powerful, clear, and constantly evolving business model, that's the real difference between a half-baked plan and a true blueprint for success that can actually last.
And that really just leaves us with one final big question for you to think about. When you look at your own business or maybe a project you're working on, is its business model a dynamic blueprint for the future, or is it kind of like a museum piece, just gathering dust and waiting for someone else to come along and disrupt it? Think about it, because the answer could literally make all the difference.